Okay, translation once again. Thus he fixed his mind, perfectly engaging it by linking it in devotional service, bhakti-yoga, without any tinge of materialism, and thus he saw the absolute personality of Godhead along with his external energy, which was under full control. Purport. Perfect vision of the absolute truth is possible only by the linking process of devotional service. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. One can perfectly realize the absolute truth, personality of Godhead, only by the process of devotional service, and one can enter into the kingdom of God by such perfect knowledge. Imperfect realization of the absolute by the partial approach of impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma does not permit anyone to enter into the kingdom of God. Sri Narada advised Srila Vyasadeva to become absorbed in transcendental meditation on the personality of Godhead and his activities. Srila Vyasadeva did not take notice of the effulgence of Brahman because that is not absolute vision. This absolute vision is the personality of Godhead, as is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 7:19, Vasudeva Sarvam Iti. In the Upanishads also, it is confirmed that Vasudeva, the personality of Godhead, is covered by the golden glowing Hiranmayena Patrena, veil of impersonal Brahman. And when the curtain is removed by the mercy of the Lord, the real face of the Absolute is seen. The Absolute is mentioned here as the Purusha, or person. The absolute personality of Godhead is mentioned in so many Vedic literatures and in the Bhagavad Gita. The Purusha is confirmed as the eternal and original person. The absolute personality of Godhead is the perfect person. The Supreme Person has many-fold energies, and out of which the internal, external, and marginal energies are specifically important. The energy mentioned here is the external energy, as will be clear from the statements of her activities. The internal energy is there along with the absolute person, as the moonlight is there with the moon. The external energy is compared to the darkness because it keeps the living entity in the darkness of ignorance. The word upashrayam suggests that this energy of the Lord is under full control. The internal potency or superior energy is also called Maya, but it is spiritual Maya, or energy exhibited in the absolute realm. When one is under the shelter of this internal potency, the darkness of material ignorance is at once dissipated. And even those who are Atmarama, or fixed in trance, take shelter of this Maya, or internal energy. Devotional service, or bhakti-yoga, is the function of the internal energy. Thus, there is no place for this internal energy. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Thus, there is no place for the inferior energy or material energy, just as there is no place for darkness in the effulgence of spiritual light. Such internal energy is even superior to spiritual bliss attainable in the conception of impersonal Brahman. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that the impersonal Brahman effulgence is also an emanation from the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. The Parama Purusha cannot be anyone except Sri Krishna himself, as is explained in the later slokas. Okay, so the verse again is bhakti-yogena manasi samyak pranite male apashyat purushang purnang mayang shatarupashrayam. Thus he fixed his mind, perfectly engaging it by linking it in devotional service, bhakti-yoga, without any tinge of materialism, and thus he saw the absolute personality of Godhead along with his external energy, which was under full control. Okay, so Prabhus, I am trying to talk loud. I hope it feels a little unnatural, but at least hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I'm going to switch screens right now because we have a PowerPoint that I put together. If I can find it. Where is it? Oh, here we go. Okay. All right, it's just coming through now. Good, there we go. So hopefully there won't be any glitches here. And for all of you over on Skype, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Anybody who wants to come over to start meeting, you'll be able to actually see a PowerPoint. Might be helpful. But anyway, okay, so this verse I've heard Srila Prabhupada give a class on. I couldn't find it, but anyway, I couldn't really look. But I've also heard Hridayananda Maharaj quote this verse, so I'm somewhat familiar with it. Oh, I'm sorry, I have the wrong verse on the screen. Excuse me. Slide number 1. Anyway, the verse is, how did that happen? I have to switch back. Just one purpose. Okay, here's the verse. Bhakti-yogena manisi samyak pranihite te amale. Excuse me. Oh, now I got it. There you go. I was on the wrong slide. That is the verse that we're on. Okay. Bhakti-yogena manasi samyak pranihite male. I highlighted one of the words here, which is apashyat purushang purnam. So apashyat. I thought that was curious because I always thought apashyat means the opposite of pashyat, to see. It's like the verse in the first chapter of Canto 2, apashyat, pashyati na pashyati. So I wrote Dvijamani Prabhu and asked him about it. He gave this real scholarly long paragraph about how when you have in front of a word, it usually means the opposite. So in this word, pashyat means to see. So when you say apashyat, it means in the past tense. So apash is saw. So what did Srila Vyasadeva see? So we're going to the next slide for anybody that doesn't see this. Here's a nice painting of Srila Vyasadeva in meditation with the Vedas in front of him. He's pinning. And he looks like he's in trance, or at least in contemplation. And off in the right-hand corner, his upper left-hand corner, we have Sri Krishna in a lotus, or rose maybe. So what he's seeing is going to be described more vividly in the next verses. But this verse very nicely begins with what his vision is. He has just had this meeting with Narada Muni, and Narada Muni advises him what his despondency came from and how to remedy it. So he, in absolute obedience and realization of the instructions of his spiritual master, he is meditating in bhakti-yoga, filling his mind. Bhakti-yogena manasi, filled with devotion, samyak pranihite amale. Pranihite means he fully engaged. Samyak pranihite male. Mala is contamination. Free from all contamination, completely engaging the mind of devotional service. By that process, apashat purusham purnam, he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purnam, completely. To see the Personality of Godhead means that he sees all of his energies as well. And then mayam chat tat apashrayam. He saw his internal potency, and the absence of his internal potency is the external potency, which he saw that was under full control. So the mayam here refers to the external energy because he's seeing that all living entities are suffering even though they don't need to. So what he saw is that bhakti-yoga, the linking process, the devotional service, in pure Krishna consciousness to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the supreme amongst any other process of self-realization, because it allows one to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Person, along with all of his multifarious energies. And thus, the living entities who are suffering in this world will be able to overcome the lower energy, the Mahamaya, by taking shelter of the other Maya, which is the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, trying to get to the next slide. Okay, so for anybody that can't see this, we're showing Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 55. Okay, so that verse is Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyas chasmi tatvata. That only by bhakti, by pure devotional service, without any motivation, without any break, only by such devotional service can one understand me in truth, completely. Tato mam tattvato gyatva. That means that to the degree that one performs pure devotional service, you will be able to know me. As Srila Prabhupada says in one purport of the Bhagavad Gita, that devotional service is gradual and proportional according to the degree of advancement we are on and according to how much we have given ourselves and how much Krishna is reciprocating with us. Proportionally, we will understand him. And therefore, Vishate Tad Anantaram, one will be able to enter into the spiritual world. So for anybody that's looking at this, I've highlighted in the translation, it says that only by devotional service one can enter into the kingdom of God, which is exactly what Srila Prabhupada is pointing out in the purport of this verse, that other processes of self-realization and other realizations of the Absolute Truth are a partial approach and they're imperfect realizations. Realizations of Brahman or Paramatma does not permit anyone to enter into the kingdom of God. So when I saw this in this verse, and especially how Srila Prabhupada said so strongly in the purport, I was thinking in my mind that, isn't impersonal Brahman realization... Sorry, I've got to check on something. Okay, I think we're all right. Impersonal Brahman realization is also part of the spiritual world. It's the effulgence emanating from Krishna's body. And realization of the Paramatma is realization of Krishna in his Paramatma feature, so doesn't one at least go back to Vaikuntha? That's what I was thinking. So I asked Mother Urmila in email, and she answered me pretty quick. She said that no, the impersonal Brahman is considered not part of the spiritual kingdom because it's not part of the Vaikuntha planets. You're just merging into Krishna's effulgence. And Paramatma realization, that was impersonal Brahman, then Paramatma realization, if a yogi leaves his body with that type of realization, he doesn't actually go to the spiritual world, but he enters into the Vaikuntha planet in this material world where Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, the Vishnu who is the super soul, actually resides. So here's the next slide. Okay, for anybody that's not watching this, there's a beautiful picture I found online with Kshirodakshaya Vishnu lying on the ocean. So there is a planet in this universe which is called Sveta Dvip. This is a transcendental abode. It's a Vaikuntha planet, Krishna's abode, which is within the material world. The super soul, his function is to guide the living entity to be the witness and the overseer. The super soul is not present in the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, in all the Vaikuntha planets, we have Lord Narayana with all of his entourage, with his paraphernalia, with his devotees, in his own spiritual planets. And then we have Goloka Vrindavan, which is above even all the Vaikuntha planets. But the super soul, Krishna expands himself as a part of his plenary portion, Ekang Shena Stito Jagat. Within this material world, he is situated, and that form is not in the spiritual world. It's only found in the material world. So if you are a yogi, you go to the Sweta planet, or if you merge into the impersonal Brahman, you can be part of Krishna's effulgence. Now, in the next slide, I have this picture that is on the internet. I heard that Jadharani did this. So I don't know. Whoever did it, they did a nice job. Anyway, it shows the spiritual world. I know this is real small. You probably can see practically nothing. But down here we have the Mahatattva, the material world, and then between the material spiritual world we have the Brahmajyoti, and this is the expanse of the spiritual world with all Vaikuntha planets, and then our destination, Goloka Vrindavan, larger than all the other Vaikuntha planets put together, with Krishna and Radharani in the world of the lotus. So the Brahmajyoti is here, not exactly part of the Vaikuntha planets, and then within the core of the material world, in one of the multifarious universes which we are in, there's one planet which I'm pointing to right here. This represents Svetadvip, where Krishna resides in his form as the super soul. So that is why the statement was there in Bhagavad Gita and confirmed by Srila Prabhupada in the purport, that no one can actually enter the kingdom of God to know him in his fullness, Purnam, Apashat Purusham Purnam, without the process of devotional service. So Krishna, Purnam, means that he is not alone. He is surrounded by all of his associates, all of his energies. On the screen right now I have a verse from the Vishnu Purana, which goes like this: Vishnu Shakti Para Prokta, that Lord Vishnu's energy which is superior. It is the internal energy. Besides that, he also has Kshetra Gyakya Tata Pura. Kshetra means the body. Everyone has a field of activities where they can perform the activities that they're trying to enjoy or suffer from within this material world. One second. That is called his field of activity, or kshetra. And kshetra gya means that person who is conscious of the field, or the owner of the field, although in actuality the only owner is Krishna, Bhoktarang Jagatapasam. But he thinks that he's the owner and the enjoyer, but he at least is a knower. So he's called the Kshetragya. So it says Kshetragyakya Tata Pura. Also a superior energy. Another type of superior energy is a living entity. So Para, the internal energy, and then Kshetragya is also Tata Para, and then Avidya Karma Sangyanya. That means that besides this, there is the external energy, the material potency, and it's characterized by avidya karma. Everyone in this material world wants to enjoy and control the material nature, the inferior energy. So that material energy is conspicuous by the propensity to try and enjoy, or in other words, ignorance produces karma, or fruitive activities by which we suffer or so-called enjoy in this world. So avidya karma sangyaya, tatirya shakti ishite. So these three energies are the primary energies of the Lord. And as Pushkar Prabhu nicely pointed out 1 or 2 weeks, when he gave class last week, that there are other energies. He classified them as bhu, pushti, tushti, which I don't know a whole lot about. I have to read up on. But anyway, those are further subcategories of these various energies. But these are the three. So this is very important to understand, because the Mayavad philosophy is that the absolute truth has no energies. That's why they're called nirvishesha. Vishesh means variety. It means energy. They're claiming that the absolute truth is void, nothingness, that he has no energies. But the Vishnu Purana says, tatirya shaktir ishite, that these are the major classifications of all his various energies. So in this verse, it's stated, apashat purushang purnam. Srila Vyasadeva saw that absolute personality of Godhead along with all of his energies, which are under full control. So I'm going to the next slide. Again, for anybody that doesn't see this, whoops, went on too far. We have a beautiful picture of the moon. This is the analogy that's given in the purport. By the way, this is a real picture. We live in a volcano on the big island of Hawaii, and we're out in the country. When it's a full moon, it looks just like this, absolutely dazzling. You can go out for a walk, a japa walk, and you don't need a flashlight because it's almost like daylight. I mean, it's just so bright, as long as there's no clouds. I mean, you can just see everything. So the moon is beautiful and illuminating. Just like this, the personality of Godhead is just like the moon, illuminating everything. And the moonshine is his energies. You can't think of the moon, the substance, without its energy, the moonshine. But as just like you're seeing in the picture here, there is a line of trees. The trees are in darkness because what's in back of the trees is blocking the sunlight. So they appear to be obscured black, opaque. Similarly, the opposite of the effulgence of the personality of Godhead, his internal potency, his energy, is darkness. As soon as it's blocked, that is the material energy. But it is his energy. It's produced. It comes from him. It's therefore under full control. So what Srila Vyasadeva saw was that even though the living entity is suffering from all kinds of miseries due to his misidentification with this material world, that Maya or energy from the Absolute Truth is under his full control, as is the internal energy. So if we take shelter of the internal energy instead of the external energy, the inferior energy, we will be released from all sufferings. Therefore, he wrote all the Vedic literatures. In the next few verses, I don't know the verse off the top of my head, but let's say half a dozen verses from where we are right now, after being asked for clarification from, my mind just went blank. We have Sutta Goswami who's speaking, and Samika Rishi. Well, anyway, the sages of Naimisharanya who are asking questions. So they ask, how is it that Shukadeva Goswami, even though he was a self-realized soul, completely absorbed in the Absolute, how is it that he was attracted to the pastimes of the personality of Godhead? Because the next few verses are going to explain in detail what Srila Vyasadeva saw, and why he wrote the Vedic literatures, why he compiled them, and why he explained the Srimad Bhagavatam to his son, Shukadeva Goswami. So in answer, Shaunaka, thank you. Shaunaka Rishi, brain dead. Shaunaka Rishi. So in answer to Shaunaka Rishi's question, Sutta Goswami gave the Atmarama verse. The Atmarama verse says that even those who are completely free from all material contaminations on the Brahmabhuta platform, when they hear the messages of the personality of Godhead, they will become attracted. So if we take shelter of that internal potency, we will be released from the clutches of Maya by Krishna's grace. So we're going to the next slide. Okay, so again, this verse is Bhakti Yogena Manasi Samyak Pranihite Male. So as I explained before, mala means contamination, and Samyak Pranihite means to engage our mind completely, undeviated at every moment, without any motivation, in pure devotional service. Samyak Pranihite Male. So it must be completely pure, and as revealed in the next line, Apashat Purusham Purnam. So Purusham, to see the personality of Godhead, this person, it must be like that, completely pure. In the Bhagavad Gita also, in the chapter which is entitled Yoga, the Supreme Person, Krishna himself says, Pratita Purushottama, that I am celebrated both in this world and in the Vedas as a Supreme Person. So if we're talking about a person, we know even in this world we are talking about absolute love. It has, of course, nothing is pure in this material world, but as far as an analogy can go, that in order to fall in love with a person, a reciprocation of two persons, it must be absolute and pure. Nothing can be held back. We can't just be concerned or fall in love with a person's grandeur or his wealth or anything extraneous. Just like, let's say, if you have a movie star or a politician or a very wealthy person, you know, people want what they have and they're attracted to it. They may not be be so concerned with the person themselves, but they're attracted by a very famous or rich person. Just like Princess Diana, wherever she went, you know, to the beach or with family and friends, she was hounded everywhere she went by photographers and reporters just trying to get some sort of a story that they could publish to make money. And eventually, she and a friend were trying to get away from some reporters that were on a motorcycle, and they were going faster and faster, and they crashed. She got killed. So her fame and being followed by everyone was actually miserable. It became a problem. So when that type of attraction is not actually something that's sought after. So we can use this analogy as far as Brahman and Paramatma realization. It's realization of the absolute truth to some degree, but it's not complete realization or relationship with the absolute truth. Only when someone becomes intimately associated with the person and his love has no boundaries. It's completely pure and it's absolute. It doesn't deviate to anyone else, doesn't love anyone more, but it is not cheating on that person. Then the love can become very, very intimate. Similarly, with the absolute truth, because we are falling in love, madly in love, again, with the personality of Godhead, we're uncovering that original relationship that we have with Him. That can only be done through the process of bhakti-yoga. That's why it says, bhakti-yoga abhijanati, that only by pure devotional service can I be known in truth as I am. So we're going to the next slide. Okay, so what is it that Srila Vyasadeva saw? So we have this verse, and in the next two verses, he says, Sutta Goswami says that Srila Vyasadeva saw that due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendental to the three modes of material nature, thinks of himself as a material product and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries. The material miseries of the living entity, which are superfluous to him, can be directly mitigated by the linking process of devotional service. But the mass of people do not know this, and therefore the learned Vyasadeva compiled this Vedic literature, which is in relationship to the supreme truth. So, this Vedic literature means the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Vyasadeva saw the sufferings of the living beings in this age. He wanted to benefit them, knowing that in the Kali Yuga they would be very unfortunate, short-lived, short memory, always disturbed by various harassments from material nature, from governments, from other living entities. He knew that in this age they need help. So therefore, he took upon himself the monumental task of compiling all the Vedic literatures in a systematic way in order to show them path out of this entanglement and back to the spiritual world, ultimately to Krishna's lotus feet. But how to get out of this entanglement? He was unsatisfied by, even after compiling all the Vedic literatures. There are 8,400,000 species of life, and out of those species of life, the living entity, he gradually goes up from insects to aquatics to beasts to finally human beings. And even in the human form of life, most of the 400,000 different species of human life are uncivilized. Only some of them are civilized. And even those that are civilized, not those so-called civilized people, are they taking advantage of the Vedas, or even if they're aware of the Vedic knowledge, they disregard it. They're vikarmis. So I'm going to go to another slide right now. It's unfortunate for those of you who don't see this, because this would be very helpful. I was listening over the last few days to this very in-depth, inspiring, and enlightening series, or seminars, which was a series of 3 lectures given by Mother Urmila, who, by the way, is going to be here at the end of the month. It was about the yoga ladder and chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita, which talks all about devotional service and the different processes of elevating oneself to the final goal. So we had a seminar about a year and a half ago that Dvijamani Prabhu, disciple of Ravinda Swarup Prabhu, he had given our Sangha about the different levels of devotional service. And in that class, there was a discussion about chapter 12. So Mother Urmila, after doing more research on it, consulting with various sannyasis and Dvijamani Prabhu, she came up with this fantastic seminar. So this and another chart, hopefully we'll be able to get to, although we're running out of time, explains about the yoga ladder. And I wanted to use this chart because it really helps to illustrate the progression of the living entity up to self-realization through various methods. And it illustrates how Srila Vyasadeva also constructed the Vedic literatures in such a way that people could gradually become developed. But it was so abstruse that and difficult to perform that very easy for people to get lost in it. Therefore, he finally composed the Srimad Bhagavatam under the instructions of Narada Muni after going into meditation as described here, and then he compiled the Vedic literature and explained it to his son, Shukadeva Goswami. So I wanted to go through this chart very quickly, although since it's 7:15, I probably won't be able to do practically any justice to it, but I will try. So many species of life. Finally, one gets to the human form of life, and even in the human form of life, many of those species are uncivilized. You get to the civilized human beings, and even amongst the so-called civilized human beings, not everyone is taking advantage of the Vedic literatures, or because of their lusty desires, they disregard the Vedic literatures, kamakarata. Therefore, they are bikarmis, and there's a very little chance that they're going to advance in spiritual life. However, after performing all kinds of sinful activities for many, many births, if they're in contact with the Vedic culture, or specifically the Varnashram system, then they may have a chance to actually start following Vedic injunctions. Still have the propensity to enjoy very much in this world, still are not interested in the personality of Godhead per se, or self-realization, but they really want to enjoy in this world, and they see by following the Vedic literatures, that's the best way to do it. It's just like if we have criminals in society, sooner or later, after going to jail, being harassed in so many ways, being endangering their own life and property, and just being in anxiety, they may start to think about becoming a good citizen and actually following the rules of the government. Once they do that, they will start to enjoy properly. And then if you're looking at the chart right here, I'm kind of pointing to this, you see where it says here, Karma Kanda? They start following the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. So that's how Srila Vyasadeva divided up the Vedas. The great majority of the Vedas is Karma Kanda, how to perform activities in this world according to rules and regulations of the Vedas, and therefore gradually uplift yourself. And then if you see here where it says Karma Kanda, or karma performed by the karmis, it's got an arrow pointing up, and it says piety. If one performs the activities and prescribed methods, which are delineated in the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, which are vast, When these are usually done by the grihastas, they're meant for all the different varnas for the purpose of enjoyment, then the result will be that one will gradually be upgraded. That's where there's an arrow here. It says piety. They will become pious in their activities, and they will be able to move up to the next rung, what's referred to as the yoga ladder, and that's called karma yoga. This is meant for, if you're looking here, it says grihastas of all varnas for purification. So karma kanda is meant for usually grihastas, because in this world, everyone wants to enjoy, and the topmost enjoyment is sex life. So if you're not a vikarmi, if you're a karmi, then lawfully you become married. You take on all the responsibilities of married life, raising children, having a job, making money. You become a responsible human being. But after going through the karma kanda portion of the Vedas, one may come to the point where he is no longer interested in performing just material activities only for enjoyment, because he sees that material enjoyment has its limitations. We all know you can eat something that you like very much, but sooner or later, very quickly, you will become satiated. Your body simply doesn't have the capacity to eat, and your tongue will become satiated, etc. You can go through any of the senses, any amount of wealth, any amount of fame. It just is not satisfying. So when one starts to perform karma kanda, he performs not karma but akarma, activities which are not meant for enjoyment per se, but actually the goal is, even though they're the same activities, but the goal is not enjoyment but rather self-realization. That's called akarma. And that is simply meant for purification. And here's the other arrow here where it says peace. The result of karma kanda is piety, but the result of karma is peace. This also is important. I'm looking at the time clock. I know we're getting late here. This is important because the result of akarma is peace. Now, why is it that we have peace? Again, I'm giving all credit to Mother Urmila. I'm just repeating what she's saying in this wonderful seminar, pointing out that the reason one becomes peaceful by performing karma yoga, activities which are meant for purification, because once one becomes pure, his faith increases, and he starts to develop good qualities. Good qualities come from following the injunctions of the Vedas, and they also come from piety. The opposite of good qualities is actually cowardice. Cowardice means that when there's something that, even though we should perform an activity for the greater good, we don't because we're afraid that it will hurt or harm us. It's just like if people are called to the draft or they volunteer to go to war for the betterment of the country, but in battle they shriek away from responsibility, they're called a coward. To the degree that you become courageous, you will not jettison or abandon your good qualities because you think of yourself. The more you become selfless, the more you are courageous, and the more you are courageous, the more you have peace. So by performing akarma, it helps with the process of becoming peaceful. Now there's a difference between karma yoga and bhakti-yoga, because one can have its goal as karma yoga, not the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I might as well interject with this first. You see here where it says karma yoga, and it's got an arrow pointing to faith. If in the process of being a karma yogi, one is graced by a devotee of the Lord, he gets transcendental faith. He sees the activities of the devotee. If he becomes attracted to it, and if he becomes attached to the devotee, and he starts to follow his instructions, he's able to enter into bhakti-yoga. But that's another story. Bhakti-yoga, which is being described here, bhakti-yoga, manasi, is completely different. It surpasses the yoga ladder. So we will come to that, hopefully, if we have time. I'll try and talk a little bit faster. So one gets peace, and as he increases in his peace, he will come to the point of jnana yoga. Jnana yoga means intellectually trying to understand the difference between spirit and matter, trying to understand by the Vedic literature, specifically the Upanishads, how he is something other than matter. That is usually performed by brahmanas specifically, or sometimes by very, very renowned householders. Through jnana yoga, you increase in your peacefulness, because unless you have peace, you will not be able to perform the activities that are required for jnana yoga, which is to sit for hours and hours simply studying the Upanishads. Strict jnana yogis are completely out of the varnashram system, in that they perform practically no activities whatsoever. That's why Prakashananda Saraswati was criticizing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Okay, what you're doing is right, but why are you not studying the Vedas? Because that's what renunciates, sannyasis, or jnana yogis do. They study the Vedas all day long, and the only way you can do that is to sit down and do nothing but study, is by being very, very peaceful, having controlled mind. So if one is advanced enough from jnana yoga, having sufficient peace and control of the mind, then he enters into dhyana yoga. And this again is by very renowned householders, or simply for the brahmanas. So you enter into dhyana yoga. Now let's go to the next slide, and then I'll explain about what the difference between the yoga ladder is and bhakti yoga. Go to the next slide. Okay, so again, we're back at our original verse, which is bhakti yoga. Manasi samyak pranite male apashat purusham purnam, and then mayam chatad upashrayam. The difference between the yoga ladder or the Vedic literatures as was compiled and presented by Srila Vyasadeva, the reason why he was dissatisfied is because this process of gradual elevation is very, very difficult, especially for those in the Kali Yuga. How can we do these things? It's only for very rare persons. And not only that, the ultimate goal of samyak, of apashat purusham purnam, seeing the personality of Godhead, realizing him in his fullness, may not be attained through that process. So it can be attained. Here's the hint, the last line, which I've highlighted. Mayam chatad upashrayam, by taking shelter of the internal energy instead of the external energy. Mayam, again, referred to in this verse, is the external energy, but chatad upashrayam, pashrita means one who's taken shelter of. So that material energy is completely under control. In other words, if we get the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by pleasing his pure devotees and following the process of devotional service, then we will very easily overcome the material nature because we've taken shelter of the spiritual nature. So the next slide, we got 2 slides left, and then we'll be done. This is the same chart, just broken up a little bit differently. Just one second. As you can see here, we've got the yoga ladder. We've got Uga Karma, performed by the vikarmis, karma kanda, performed by the karmis who get piety. Then they perform karma yoga, which is for self-realization as its goal. Then they move into jnana yoga. As they become more peaceful and control the mind, they can eventually move into dhyana yoga. Those who are uberkarmis, they go to the lower species or the lower planetary systems. They can go to hell. Whereas the karma yogis, they enter, they either stay on this earth or they can enter the Swargaloka, the heavenly planets. Those who are karma yogis without devotional service, they can be formed. Well, both the karma yogis, devotional karma yogis, and the karma yogis without their goal of pure devotional service, they can enter into the family of yoga, advanced yogis, or go to the spiritual or to the heavenly planets, or be born in the planets of the rishis or the prajapatis. Those who are advanced to the perfection of jnana yoga, they can realize the supreme Brahman, and those who are perfected dhyana yoga can be perfect in the realization of either Brahman or Paramatma. Now, this is the difference, which I hope I can try and make clear, is that Srila Vyasadeva was unsatisfied by all of this because it's too difficult, and you won't necessarily reach the supreme goal. You may, if possible, out of many thousands amongst men, you may get to the point where you can release partially Brahman or Paramatma. But there, you may never, you will never get to the point of bhakti-yoga, apashapurusham purnam, seeing the personality of Godhead in His fullness, unless you perform bhakti-yoga. So we are not performing any of this in the yoga ladder. None of this is what we're doing. We're doing what you see over here on the right-hand side, which is bhakti-yoga. Bhakti-yoga is described in chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita, that one should perform it with undeviated, pure devotion. As is stated here, samyak pranihite malay. But then if it can't be performed like that, because we're not advanced enough, then Krishna, he recommends abhyasa yoga, which is a practice of devotional service. And if one can't even practice the rules and regulations of devotional service, then there's the angas of bhakti. So I'll try and go through this quickly. I know we're over time already. Maybe 3 more minutes and we'll be done. As anyone who is on this yoga ladder at any time, if he comes in contact with the devotee, as I explained it before, and he gets some preliminary faith, which is beyond the modes of material nature. It's transcendental faith. If he becomes hooked up to devotional service like that, he gets the chance to perform abhyasa yoga. Now, if one is just performing karma, or even vikarma, he can also perform the angas of bhakti, but that's not the same as abhyasa yoga, because with the angas of bhakti, if his mind is not engaged, if he just goes to the temple, he puts a donation in the box, he sees the deities, and he goes, but his whole intention is to enjoy this material world, either legally or illegally, that is good, but it's not the same as bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga comes when he increases his piety, or he comes in contact with the devotee, and he receives peace. This is one other aspect of bhakti yoga I need to explain. Sorry I'm going over. But the process of becoming peaceful is described in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says that he is the enjoyer, bhoktarang jagatapasang, the enjoyer of all sacrifices, the enjoyer of all activities. Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, he's the owner and controller of everything within the universe. Suridam Sarvabhutanam. And Mang Shantam Richati. Sorry, I didn't say that right. But Mang Shantam Richati. By understanding that Krishna is the supreme proprietor of everything, when he's in that consciousness and his goal is to please, or at least starting out to appreciate the personality of Godhead. and that appreciation increases, he will become peaceful, as we've already explained what that comes from courage to give up sense gratification. Then he can get the qualification to start performing Abhyasa Yoga. The difference between the Angas of Bhakti, which is Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, going to the temple, hearing, chanting, etc. Those are the external Angas of Bhakti. The internal Angas of Bhakti is what's called Abhyasa Yoga. That means when we actually start engaging our mind, bhakti-yogena manasi sanyat pranite, and then it comes to the point of amale, free from all material contamination. So actually, Abhyasa means, of course, practice. It means repetition. Actually, we just read in the introduction of the Bhagavad Gita that devotional service is not just practice with the body, but it's practice with the mind. So when our intention is not this material world, when by the grace of the devotee our faith is increased and our intention is go to the spiritual world, that is our goal. Even if we're not free of contamination, but that's what our goal is, then we are performing Abhyasa Yoga, engaging our mind. And when Abhyasa Yoga is perfect, it becomes Raganuga Bhakti, which is Vaidhi Bhakti, following the rules and regulations, but with bhava, with ecstasy, because we're completely pure. So how do we get from Abhyasa Yoga to Raganuga Bhakti? As you can see here, there's an arrow pointing, and it says desire. By increasing our desire, there's a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, or purport in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Srila Prabhupada says that all the living entities in the material world, the jivas who are suffering, they can get out of the material entanglement simply by desiring. But that desire is not a shallow desire. It's got to be intense, overwhelming, all-consuming desire. And that desire comes from faith, from other devotees, from hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, by being the association of the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavatas, our desire to attain pure devotional service will increase. And as it increases, we get to the point of Raganuga Bhakti, and from Raganuga Bhakti, we can enter into the realm of what's called Ratatmika Bhakti, which is pure love of Godhead. So the last slide, was that? No, that was the last slide. Okay. I apologize for going over. I can't do justice to this seminar that I just heard Mother Urmila give, but I thought those were some very important points that kind of put in perspective of why Srila Vyasadeva was dissatisfied and what he wanted to present, what is being revealed in this verse from the Bhagavatam. So we are over. If anyone has any questions or comments, you can make them now. Otherwise, since we're over already, we can just go ahead and in class. But I'm going to unmute everybody. If you can just give me 1 second. Off. Off. Okay, we are unmuted at this point. There's a couple of chats. I'll try and go through them as well as I can. But does anyone have a question or a comment?
Just wanted to say, great class, Prabhu. A lot of amazing information. I'm going to have to play this one back a few times to really absorb it all. But it's great the way you distinguish between the materialistic processes and pure bhakti. Wonderful.
Oh, thank you. It's Mother Urmila's great. I really want to encourage everybody. Oh, by the way, Mother Anu had a great suggestion. She suggested that we, instead of just having Srimad Bhagavatam class, Bhagavad Gita class every once in a while, we have specific classes on certain subjects. So actually, she didn't know that we have had seminars in the past, but she was suggesting different things like how to chant properly, which we had a seminar that Mother Urmila gave, along with maybe how to do puja, how to do maybe a seminar on karmic reactions. So I wanted to kind of throw that out to all of you because Mother Urmila is coming at the end of this month, and she's open to do seminars. She's got a whole list of seminars that she's already prepared. I would highly recommend that we beg her to do this one that I just talked a little bit about the yoga ladder. It is absolutely fabulous. So anyway, maybe if the devotees would want to think along those lines, if you have like specific subject matters in devotional service that you'd like to cover, if you could suggest them to me, either writing me or just letting me know, we can ask Mother Urmila and see what she feels about it. I think that would really be a good idea. I'm just trying to read the chat here.
Ramananda Prabhu, I would just like to say I very much appreciate all the effort you put into giving this class. I didn't get to see the slides, but you just did so much research and brought us so much information. It was just thank you so much for it. And one thing you said that I really appreciated was it's easy to say, I forget how you put it, it's easy to not take shelter of the material world, and then if you take shelter of the spiritual world. And I remember Stephen Covey put it in a very easy way to remember. It's easy to say no if there's a bigger yes behind it. So I appreciated that. And also, at the very end, we have to have an intense, overwhelming desire. That I just really appreciated that. That's what Ramananda Roy said at the end of telling Lord Chaitanya about Krishna consciousness. He said that's the bottom line. You have to have an intense, overwhelming desire. So thank you for reminding us.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I feel gratified because that's what I was trying to get out. That point, so that's good.
I also wanted to thank you for such a wonderful class, and asking and hoping and praying that you'll give class more often. You do a really good job. I know it's difficult because you've got all these technical things to deal with, but it was wonderful. Thank you.
Ramananda Prabhu.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much, Mother Jai. Yes.
I also appreciated your condensation. I don't mind you go a little over. I'm not a time cop on this. I think if we close around 8 o'clock, this is the time. Here's the way I approach this. This is the time of the day that I spend with Bhagavatam in the association with the devotees of this Sangha. And so I don't mind if it goes to 8 o'clock. It depends on, how lively it is or how much there is to talk about. But as you know, I always like these purports by Srila Prabhupada. And there's two things in the purport. And one of them, as he mentions, that Vasudeva, the personality of Godhead, is covered by the golden, glowing Hiranyamayena Patrena veil of impersonal Brahman. And it's like a curtain. And so it's only removed by the mercy of the Lord. And he reserves the right to reveal himself. And it's interesting, like the Lord, he doesn't hide in the shadows and the darkness. It's a whiteout. It's like skiers and mountain climbers. Sometimes they experience a whiteout when they can't differentiate a landscape in front of them on account of the sun reflecting off the snow. So it's like that. The Lord just turns up the lights. He's got an effulgence that covers him. And it begs the verse from Sri Upanishad, the 16th verse, O my Lord, O regulating principled destination of the pure devotees, well-wisher of the progenitors of mankind, please remove the effulgence of your transcendental rays so that I can see your form of bliss. And so Veda Vyas was able to induce the Lord by devotional service, which is the only way to really do this, to reach the Purusha Bhagavan darshan of the Lord. He induces the Lord to dim the light, to remove that effulgence. So he saw the Lord, according to the verse, the Lord in his external energy, which is also interesting because in the purport, as Srila Prabhupada points out, Narada advised Srila Vyasadeva to become absorbed in the transcendental meditation on the personality of Godhead and his activities. So that's interesting. But there's one other thing that jumped out at me in this purport, and maybe this is, can be formed into a question. Prabhupada says the external energy is compared to darkness. Okay, that's not a problem. But the internal potency or spiritual energy is also called Maya. But it is spiritual Maya, the energy exhibited in the absolute realm. So I guess Prabhupada's referring to Yoga Maya here. It's kind of an unusual reference, because if you're going to deal with the internal and external energy and the marginal energy, the potencies of the Lord, the simple way is it's not to express it in this way. It's a little confusing. And he says that the Atmaramas are fixed in trance. And you keep these windows coming up here. Let's see.
Oh, I just switched to that portion of the purport. So
anyway, the Atmarama, those that are fixed in trance, take shelter of this Maya or internal energy. So, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, well, thank you. That's a very good point, that Maya means energy. Maya in the material world is illusion. But Maya in the spiritual world, Mahamaya, also the living entity can't understand the personality of Godhead in its fullness, because the personality of Godhead himself does not know the extent of all of his energies. So the difference is that in the material world, we are all suffering from identifying with the inferior energy. But the spiritual world, which we are a part of, that is our nature. If we take shelter of that Maya, that which is also in energy, then we'll be free from all suffering. So that's why the Atmarama verse is being pointed out here, because it's coming up very soon, the next few verses, that those who are completely situated in Brahmabhuta, self-realization, even they are attracted to the pastimes of the Lord, which means that the Lord's pastimes are completely transcendental. So his internal energy, his spiritual energy, is completely different in quality from the material energy. If we take shelter of it, then just as the Atmaramas, they're completely satisfied, but they're attracted because it's spiritual energy. Similarly, the conditioned souls, if we hear about the Lord by taking shelter of his pastimes, we're taking shelter of this internal energy. So both are Maya, both are energies, but one is internal, one is real, and one is external, and that is unreal. Just like the moon is substance, and the moon has its energy. It's moonshine or sunshine, whatever analogy, illuminating object, and it's only what is in front of it that blocks the light. That's in darkness. So the material energy is that which is the opposite of the Supreme, and it's just absence of his internal energy. That is illusion. That is bias.
So I got clarification this morning. I've been around this for 40 years, right? And
right.
so I'm thinking, for 40 years, I'm thinking Maya is more or less synonymous with illusion. But now I've got the clarification that it's simply a power, it's a potency, and it can produce illusion, but but it can cut both ways. That's interesting.
Maya, sometimes I see written Maya and Maya with kind of a long A at the end, and I'm not a Sanskrit scholar. I don't want to go too deep into it because I may not be totally accurate. But Maya is generally, as I've sort of observed, is referring to the acting within the material energy, the illusions of this material world, and Maya referring to the spiritual energy, Yoga Maya. So we might see it a little differently. And Ramanandaji, just as a clarification, I think you said, and I apologize, I was away for the last 10 minutes of the class, a great class though. Just when you went into the yoga ladder, I had to step away. But I heard you say that, and it went fast, the spiritual energy is real and the material energy is illusion. But you might want to clarify
Narhari, you're really breaking up.
That material nature is real, but what is illusory about it?
Okay, that's a very good point. Very good point. All right. Yes, it's not that the material energy does not exist. It's one of the potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The illusion is that we're trying to enjoy something that we are not. We are not part of this material world. We are not meant to enjoy. We are meant to be enjoyed. And the material energy is temporary. We're looking for happiness in some place that will not exist. It only exists temporarily. So therefore, how can you have any? It's just like Srila Prabhupada sometimes would give the example of the parents letting the children make sand castles on the beach. When it comes time, they have to leave, and then the waves come and they dash all of their work. It really doesn't have any substance. That's called vastu. Vejam vastavam achut vastu. The spiritual world is vastu. It's the real substance, where this material world, even though it is a potency of the personality of Godhead, it's not that it's nothing, but it's illusory in that we're trying to enjoy it. We're trying to enjoy something that's miserable and temporary. Ashashvatam. Was that the point you were trying to make?
Good clarification. Yeah, I knew you knew it. I just want to make sure that everybody understood that that the material nature it's a real energy, and it's actually is eternal. It's temporary in that it's manifest and unmanifest, manifest and unmanifest. But according to Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says prakritim purusham chaivan vijunati abhavapi, that they are both eternal energies. But the spiritual energy is always manifesting itself. The material sometimes is drawn in, just like the spider. The analogy is given: spider draws its web. Web. What's the word for the little string? The thread, what have you. It sometimes it draws it back within the body, but yet it still somehow exists within the body. The material energy is eternal, but sometimes it's manifesting and sometimes it isn't. Krishna draws it within, but it's still eternal.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Ramananda, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I like Vidagda's mother's point when he noticed, if I understood it correctly, of course, that material energy transforms according to our consciousness. And it's really nice, that analogy that also you made with the moon and the objects that blocking the moon. So it's like, I guess for me easiest to understand that as long we have our ego in front of us, that's what's blocking us from personality of Godhead. As soon our ego is dissolved, nothing else is an obstacle. There's no obstacles in front. And so also the material nature becomes spiritual nature. Isn't it that Prabhupada, that's what he was saying, that it transforms. Everything is spiritual, he said, that, it transforms according to our consciousness.
Wonderful point, yeah. Yeah, as soon as we give up our egos by Krishna's grace, then the material world's influence, Mahamaya's influence, completely dissipate. Just as Prabhupada said in the purport, that as soon as there's light, then immediately the darkness is dissipated. More Krishna Rake, no, that's not it. What has it go? Krishna Surya Sama, Maya Haya Andakar, Yahan Krishnatan, Maya Adhikar. I hope that's correct. That the Krishna is just like the sun, and Maya is just like darkness. So wherever there is light, there cannot be darkness. Krishna Surya, he's like the sun. Okay. There were some other questions on the chat, but I think maybe a little bit too complicated, especially considering what time it is. So, thank you very much, Prabhus, for your kindness and listening to our presentation today. I guess that's about it. All right, thank you very much, Prabhus. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you.
Jai. Hare Krishna, Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol.